Hello and welcome to Nerdicky for Nerds by Nerds. I'm joined by Scott W today. How are you doing, Scott?
Outstanding. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. You had reached out to us because I guess you've seen the other Scott that was on the other day, and you have a Kickstarter finishing up for Neon Blood, which is a Cyberpunk OSR game.
Yeah, we'll say dirty OSR, just because the OSR nerds. Okay, full disclosure, I am also a nerd, but in our little niche, people like to nitpick when you say OSR. They expect it's just regular old-fashioned zero edition D&D with guns, and that's kind of not what we're about. We do change things up a little bit to make it a little more spicy and exciting for players at the table. And then, yeah, Scott directed me to you guys. He was in a question and answer I was doing. He was like, "Hey, by the way, you should check these guys out. They love having guests." So thank you for everyone.
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's great. We've been chatting a little while, kind of getting to know each other. And you're also a veteran, so thank you for your service. Appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Um, so what does OSR mean to you then? Because like you said, when I think of OSR, I think about fantasy, right? Like old
Yeah.
school D&D. You're playing a dwarf or a halfling or a fighter, not both.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So for me, OSR is that bringing it back to those ground basics of things can be extremely deadly, things can go sideways, but the player decisions and the challenge to the player is the key piece to that, and how they interact with the avatar, right, which is their character, to overcome those obstacles and go through the scenarios and have that adventure and tell those stories is kind of where I have the OSR.
So cyberpunk seems to be all the rage nowadays. I think there's four cyberpunks on
Yeah.
Kickstarter right now.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
what do you think's the draw? Is everyone just trying to make a playable Shadowrun?
Uh, so I'm glad you said that, because I've done that twice in interviews and I got some nasty commentary, but we'll put a pin in
Yeah, yeah.
that.
You can blame
Yeah,
me. You can blame me. I said it.
I don't, I'll probably say some other things that people don't want to hear too about
Yeah.
the other game. But yeah, so, a lot of this is like when I first started doing this and started play testing it, of course it was like, oh, you got a grift. I'm like, well, newsflash, everything is a grift in life, and take advantage while the iron is hot.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
with, Cyberpunk 2077 coming out, at first that was a grand idea, because it was like, oh, awesome, cyberpunk is now kind of back in the public conscious. And it is what it is with our real world political situation, the climate and the society. People are starting to go back and revisit these old 80s classics, and they realize, oh, hey, some of this stuff is actually accurate of what's going on and
Yeah,
how
yeah.
can play out. And I think there's that level of some trepidation, but also with some, that tantalizing excitement. You get like, yeah, I can see myself, eating human beings and riding on a on a motorcycle out in the desert wastelands. Like, well, you might want to recheck that, because that's not really how things are going to pan out for you. But yeah, and then CD Project Red sort of it really didn't do anyone any favors by tainting. The game is interesting, but yeah, they definitely tainted the cyberpunk image, to be honest with you. So yeah, riding those coattails is definitely something that we're all doing. It is what it is.
Yeah, yeah. So what is the premise behind Neon Blood?
So with us, man, here's where I get in trouble. So essentially, what makes us different than Cyberpunk 2020 or Cyberpunk Red, right, and Shadowrun? Here it goes. My system is playable. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So I come back. I played Rollmaster for a few years. So believe me when I tell you, there are games that are designed around an antiquated verisimilitude goal, and that just happens to be the big names at the table. And they're not. It's not that they're not fun, but there is some complication factors that you get into with those games. For Neon Blood, I took the how do you have as much fun with this game? How do I make firefights feel frenetic and essentially I call it a two-way range. I have combat experience, and so I'm like, how do I bring that level of experience to a table to make it fun for people to be like, oh, gunfights could be super deadly and super fast, and I need to make good decisions. But also the biggest piece is, how do I make hacking stack on top of that and make hacking matter at all times during a firefight or when a team is engaged and I'm also trying to sneak around, because really a hacker is nothing but a sorcerer thief, right? When you think about it, they're casting spells through apps and they're sneaking around the internet trying to find information. So how do I couple that, make it stack and mesh together so that no one is bored? Because with Shadowrun and Cyberpunk, almost always when the hacking starts, everyone else is just like,
Yeah. Well, it's like being in space on a ship, and now it's the pilot's turn.
Yeah, right.
I've been useless all campaign. Now I'm going to do stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so that's how that was our design goal. And also to keep everything with, to borrow a term from 5th edition, that bounded accuracy. So you're not no ridiculous bonuses and penalties. We have a unified target number system. So the target number remains constant throughout for skills. And then we tweak that with advantage and disadvantage, because that's probably one of the greatest mechanical devices ever created for role-playing games. It simplifies things so much. And really, it really comes down to, and everything is pushed to the player, not so much as powered by the apocalypse kind of games, but in our game, for instance, if you're taking cover, right, the choice isn't, when you take cover, it's not cover does, so much of this and so much of that. It's, hey, you're behind cover. How do you want this cover to operate? It's light cover. Do you want it to make you harder to hit, or do you want to let it absorb some of the incoming damage? And so then we do that with almost everything in the game to allow players to really jump into the moment of the narrative of the scene and kind of dictate how that story is flowing for them.
Oh, that's a fun twist on mechanic of cover. And I can see how you could apply that to other things as well.
It's applied to armor as well. Your body armor isn't always activated. You get to choose if you're because our armor has a number that it ablates damage, but it also has a durability, because again, I've worn body armor and that doesn't last forever. So you can only take so many rounds before your body armor is done. And so we allow that of like, hey, you're wearing body armor, but you can take the damage, or you can let your armor activate and you can ablate some of this damage that's incoming. But once it's done, it's done. And you got to kind of judge where you are in the run at the time. Yeah. Like, oh, are we deep enough in yet? Or are we still at the shallow point of where we're going to be in trouble if someone brings a LNG to the fight? But yeah.
So, are you currently playing games? Does your job allow for that? Like, there seems to be a huge amount of crossover between the military and gaming.
Yes, because this is going to sound terrible and the taxpayers might get angry, but we do get extremely bored, especially when we're deployed, right? There's only so many patrols you do. There's only even a downtime work. Like I'm up in the senior enlisted ranks for the military. So my job is all manning and manpower control. And there's a lot that goes on, but it's just me and my wife. Our daughter is 23. So I don't have little kids to contend with or any of the things to deal with. So my wife is cool with me being a dork. And when my work day is done, I'll like, hey, I'm going to write some more stuff because I want to, try to create. And it's not that I want to sell products. That's just a natural byproduct. It's like, if you're an artist, and you guys know this as well, there's that monster inside you that just has to speak those words to truth, right? And you got to get it out to make it a reality, no matter how awesome or how crappy it might be. The important piece is getting that out. And so that's kind of what I do. And yeah, I got the free time for it. And military, we just really like it. And, we like everything about games, because whatever distracts you and allows you to bring a dark sense of humor to it will always win the day with us. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, from some of the people I've spoken to, it's like, you're like always on, but mostly there's nothing to do, right? Until there is. And then...
Yeah, exactly. It's boring until it's not boring. And then it's really, really not boring.
Yeah. Yeah. So, are you playing in person, or are you playing, virtually?
So we were having an in-person group, but because of the rules restrictions for the pandemic, it's bad for everyone. It's stressful, but for the military, we're under a lot more restrictive guidance. And so we had to stop the in-person group almost immediately. And then I ran Strategicon games over the weekend to demo the game. And then I have a virtual group that has been playing with me as well for the last year.
Okay. So, and this isn't your first endeavor on Kickstarter. So, what are you using to get the word out?
So that's the weird thing. With Cyberpunk, it's a little bit easier. We've gone through some Facebook groups that are Cyberpunk devoted, and they have tens of thousands of members. But of course, you put a post up and it's like, oh, I have one like, okay, stop counting likes. but it's mostly social media and then outreach for interviews for folks like you and a couple other places. And then if you can run a game and demo your stuff, I always recommend that. And so Strategicon, OrcCon really happened to fall right in near the end of this. And it was a perfect opportunity to get in there, do a virtual game session. There were people who could observe and listen in on what was going on and make that judgment call. And they get to hear the feedback and then really make the decision of, hey, this is something I should probably back, and see what happens with it. But yeah.
I guess maybe silver lining of the pandemic, there's a lot of virtual conventions that you could get involved with if you wanted to, for playtesting and running the game.
Oh,
having
yeah,
people check it out.
Yeah, right. I live in Memphis, and there's no way I'd ever go to I think Strategicon is what, LA. I would never go to LA on a whim to go to a con. So yeah, correct. Yeah.
That adds up fast.
Yes. Like Kickstarters don't do that well. I'm not Pinnacle.
Yeah. So. On the plus side, though, when you do travel, you get to skip the line.
Yes, that is very nice. If I'm
free luggage
with other military, and free luggage, we do not pay for that. Thank you to everyone watching. I love that you have allowed us to do that.
Well, I was telling you, like we had an intern paid intern for a while that was still active duty. And part of the program was him, doing internships. And when we went to Gen Con, it was like, oh, we need more interns from the military.
It's true.
The luggage adds up after a while.
It does, especially now they're charging for everything. Yeah, the only time it's a real down is traveling with my wife. So she doesn't get the head of line privileges, no matter how hard I try and be like, look, man, she's also a dependent. She was a veteran. And they're like, I'm sorry, she's not active duty. All right. And then, she's really nice. She's like, wait, you want to go on? I was like, no, what kind of man am I going to be if I'm going to leave you standing here? No, we're going to stand in this line.
What kind of person?
Yeah. To be fair enough. Yeah.
I guess it depends where you're at in your relationship. You're like, I need a break from you. You stand here in this line and think about being you for a while I go.
Oh man. We've been married long enough where it's, we're well beyond those points.
I feel you there. I've been married for a bit myself.
Yeah.
Since, I don't know, 98, whatever that math works out to be.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Congratulations. That's those are some tough years, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But it's fun after you get over that hump of like that 6 to 7 year mark. Everything else is just like, this is gravy. We got it. We actually do like each other.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the person you marry, you like, that's definitely a thing.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. And then I have one kid that's almost grown-ish, and then the other's 16.
Oh.
And then my son's 20, so.
Oh, man. Those are
still here, still hanging out. I think they're both not going to leave.
It happens. So. I mean,
RPG with DBJ wants to know, will this game have gun porn or cyber shopping, meaning huge shopping lists or simple mechanics for descriptors?
A little of column A, a little of column B. Just because I'm military and I do like firearms, I do break them down. We have a section on firearms, so pistols, long guns. We do simplify it to light pistols, medium pistols, heavy pistols, AR style rifles, battle rifles, DMR rifles, LMGs, that kind of thing. Future primitive, if you wanted to be the person for whatever reason is using a bow. If you can't let go that you're not an elven archer in 2035, we're going to make that happen for you.
Look, man, if it was good enough for Rambo, it's good enough for me.
I'm just saying, and it's how we do our combat mechanics that the weapon choice really does start to matter. And because I do shoot professionally, and so I've taken all of it away from 9mm versus 10mm. That debate is nonsensical. I will tell you what round I would want to be shot with the most, and the answer is going to be none. I do not want to be shot, right? That does not feel good. And it
sounds like a bad deal to me.
It is a very bad time. So we've taken all of that, but what we've done is we've added aspects to the guns so that can really make a difference. So let's say our DMR has an aspect that, normally it's a sniper rifle, right? It's a bolt action, single action rifle. But if you roll within a certain parameter, like say a natural 20, its aspect is devastating, and you add an extra D4's worth of damage to that weapon because you're just smashing in home on that, in addition to the other benefits of a natural 20. The shotgun has the vicious aspect. So depending on range, a shotgun can be incredibly lethal. But if with the vicious aspect, if you're hitting it and you don't drop them on the initial burst, every time you hit someone with a shotgun, after that it adds +1 per consecutive time you slam into someone. So you're just building those wound stacks on top of wound stacks for targets. And like I said, hit points are incredibly low even for player characters. There's not really a leveling system. What you start with, you start with. So you may be the Krieg, which is our version of a street samurai. But I will tell you now that I've had enough people playing Kriegs where they walk into the initial gunfight with a little bit of arrogance because they think they have body armor and that those 12 hit points plus constitution or whatever. And then they realize that even the lowest end ganger with a submachine gun on doing 3-round bursts, that will make you have a really bad day really, really fast. And then for Cyberware, we have a fairly decent selection of the more commonplace Cyberware items. In addition to a few things that we really pulled out, we have adrenal stems that are implanted that help you recover from essentially flatlining. They just jumpstart the body for you and get you kind of back into the fight a little bit easier. So we've went that route. There's our Musco regulators, our cyberware that allows you to essentially take advantage on initiative based on the level that you've put into your body. And so we wanted to replicate not a higher dexterity, but an ability to, no kidding, move faster than other human beings on the battlefield because you've had this implant in you. But everything is done up also by a tier, this tier pattern. So 1 through 3, it's part of that unified system of attributes, cyberware, guns, gear. Some of the abilities of the characters are all generated around this tier system of 1 through 3. So +1 through +3 for the attributes, tier 1 through 3. And how you start doing those, then it all comes down to they provide benefits to you on the tier system, but we also have upkeep phases and restock phases. And that's where you start realizing that maybe having 7 tiers of augmentations isn't really the benefit to you. Because a lot of games, they're like, we're doing a run and we made $100,000. Well, awesome. Well, why am I still adventuring then? Oh, no. You owe money, right? So your initial cyberware is going to be, the costs are low because we abstracted it down to single digits or, small double-digit amounts. But the reality is no one's going to pop cyber eyes in your skull for one credit, right? They're going to do it for $100,000, and you're going to owe money to those mega corporations because they're not suddenly benevolent in 2035. Right. And so we've incorporated that of like your tiers, that those tiers add up, and you start making these deals and these checks, and that's how much money you're going to start to owe. And always is like, well, I don't pay it. Okay, cool story. So the first time you don't pay it and you go in debt, right? You have that timer of like, you owe this money between now and the end of the next run. If you don't do it, the corporation starts making your cyberware malfunction because they control it no matter what you do, right? They're going to worm their way in. They have professional hackers. You can try all you want. The second time you don't pay your bills, then they're going to make things really difficult. You start taking disadvantage on your smart guns, right? You're just going to start missing because your shit's sorry, I swore. You start malfunctioning. Sorry, military, my bad. And then the third time you don't pay, they send in what we call reinvestment agents, and they're going to go ahead and take the cyberware back from you. So
could that be your job? Like I can see like just being a group that goes out and takes out other runners or whatever they're calling them.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Glitches is our fancy term. Yeah, absolutely. And that really depends on, and we've left it so open-ended for how the game works. Like, are you going to go against mega corporations? Sure, probably. But yeah, do you want to form a mercenary group who provides personal security and goes out and hunts down other glitches or other human beings who aren't paying their bills? That would be totally possible within the system. And hopefully I answered his original question with the amount of gear we have. It's like I said, it's very balanced. But I don't get into the drawing the lines of, well, 6.5 millimeter rifle technically has this velocity drop out of a 20-inch barrel, because that doesn't really matter in a role-playing game. I'm just going to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think Mike had also asked about cyberware. So that kind of like, you covered that question as well, kind of in there. I always find it hilarious when people are, especially when 5e came out and they're really unhappy about getting healed after a long rest.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's unrealistic. You can't heal unless you have magic. I'm like, no, what's unrealistic is getting stabbed by a spear 7 times and not dying.
Yeah, exactly. And so we've covered that in our last game, but not well enough. And so we've addressed that of like, look, hit points are not you being physically hit by bullets. It's not until the last bullet comes at you or the last blade strike comes at you that you flatline because you're being taken out physically. Hit points are meant to represent psychological stress of a battlefield, especially if most people have never been shot at, which can, be glad, but there's a level of trauma and stress that go on with that. And so I've told people, like, even though your pistol may do single action, that doesn't mean you're just squeezing the one round and that roll represents one round. That roll really represents, I'm doing some careful, I'm trying to aim, I'm pulling the trigger nice and steady and slow in combat. We're doing our thing. And that roll represents the one time that bullet is going to be able to affect the target. And you may do a couple of points of damage to someone, but that doesn't mean necessarily you slammed into them. It could be, that bullet went through all of the soy vegan peanuts next to them and it shattered them all over, and there's crap flying everywhere and there's dust in the air now, and they're a little bit shaken because they realize they almost got shot in the face. And so it's capturing that moment for gamers, and like, stop thinking of hit points as I've been hit a bunch of times.
Yeah,
like
never going to happen.
Never going to happen, right? Yeah. You will know when you get hit by a bullet in this game and really take that damage.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes as a GM, I'll even kind of like describe their damage in that way of, it's not that you got hit, but, you've deflected several blows and now your sword arm is aching. Take 3 points of damage or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a hallmark of really great narration and a good understanding of, like, stretching that imagination out of like, okay, I got to stop thinking myopically and,
but it is fun. But it is a lot. I have to say it is a lot more fun to tell someone they've just been shot by an arrow and sticking out your thigh than the other way around.
Absolutely. Right. And that's one of those rare instances of like, yeah, okay, maybe that's a 1 round equals 1 roll thing.
Yeah.
But even then, yeah, hit points abstraction is big.
So DBJ wants to know setting, specific city, only Earth orbit or solar system, beyond the Oort cloud. I don't know what Oort cloud is. But. So
the Oort cloud is it's part of the outer space banding that surrounds the Earth and lets us travel beyond. Our solar system travels beyond. So right now it's set up to where we have a setting primer of Earth from 2020 to 2035. And I went at it with the logical steps of like, here's some of the things that could possibly happen if enough negativity happens, and here's how things could fall out. So redistribution of land assets, things like that. And then we have links to resources that we use. And so one of them is a resource that draws random city maps for you. And so we use that to say, we don't know what your sprawl looks like. I don't know where you're running, but here's a make-believe sprawl that you can drop down. That's a portion of a city that could really be anywhere. I'm looking at one now that has a river that runs through it next to a major park. And that could be from New York or to somewhere in California, right, in the right locations. So we leave a lot of that. We don't want to tell people, hey, you have to play in Seattle, right? Because I've never been to Seattle. I don't really care about Seattle, and I don't know anything about Seattle. So that never really stuck with me. I don't, it just is what it is. We give everyone the tools to make it realistic for them. And then part of the nano sprawl kit that we're doing as part of the first breach that we had, the unlock, right, is a series of tools that allow you to quickly generate those sprawls from what do I find in a data cache when I'm hacking, who's on the street that we might meet, what is surrounding us right now. And it's these real quick dice rolls of, okay, cool, there's a holosynth lab over there where I can go and enjoy some VR augmented reality movies. There's a pharmacy up the road and things like that. We want to be able to let people build quickly on their actual scene as they need it, without telling you, hey, like I said, you're in Seattle, I hope you enjoy Tacoma, even though you've never been there.
Yeah. So we ran a Shadowrun game a while back, but we used the setting, but used Cypher System instead. And even our GM, when he started researching it, he saw that people were doing that with Powered by the Apocalypse as well.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's like, even people that are fans of that setting aren't really necessarily fans of the mechanics and stuff like that. So it is nice when other designers come in and maybe do some of the heavy lifting and put together a system that's easier for people to kind of get in there and play the game, as you said, make it playable. So like you could totally use Shadowrun and reskin it with the mechanics that you came up with,
I mean, I
or some
will.
other game.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. So I will tell you a few more things he did ask about. So we do have a product. Well, it's a supplement that was unlocked. I was actually doing it before we got on. It's called our Preternatural Chrome. So as the cell line is, do you want elven submachine gun wielding drone jockeys? Well, this is how you're going to get them, right? Do you want psionics? That's how you're going to get them. And Preternatural Chrome again is going to be, I think it's probably around 100 pages if I can estimate it correctly, and it has the like the what we call metagens, right? So everyone has to think of a new fancy term for demi-humans. So we
Yeah.
got our metagens, so we got our species. They're very simple everyday species, and we explain in the book why everywhere in the world would understand what an elf is, and we explain that out. Basically, it's because of marketing. By 2035, everyone in the world has seen Lord of the Rings, and because of what happens in order for these species to come on Earth, the marketing value and the psychology of that really worked out in their favor, because everybody on Earth knows what an elf looks like. Everyone knows what a dwarf looks like. You know, everyone knows what these small folk look like, what giants look like, and gnolls and all this. So that's what we went with that. And then with the species, there's a whole developmental cycle for that. And we removed some of the things that are considered problematic for people,
Mm.
but we've explained away also some of the abilities they might have based on, it's not just because you're an elf, you can do this. Because you're an elf who grew up in this environment, this is why you do some of the things that you do and have these abilities you have. And then outside of Preternatural Chrome, there's an appendix that's reserved for game masters to use as they want, and it's Data Cache N, which allows them to put androids in the game if they so choose. Again, it's it's kind of that flavor mixing, and we've allowed everything up to the GMs and the players to discuss what power levels they want to look at. And then we have another supplement that it didn't unlock, and it probably won't for the Kickstarter, but because I can't stop doing what I do once I fulfill Kickstarter things, it's called Above and Beyond, and we intend on taking things to the logical step of space and keeping it cyberpunk. So if you think The Expanse,
Okay.
right, would be that kind of thematic goal that we're looking at for Above and Beyond.
So it sounds like you plan to play here for a while.
Yeah, I love cyberpunk. I grew up reading cyberpunk material. I grew up playing Shadowrun and Cyberpunk 2020. I really love it. I'm a fantasy nerd at heart, but I really do like cyberpunk, and this is a project that, given the things we've done with it and the feedback we've gotten from people who are starting to realize that, you know, initiative doesn't have to be one static role and you only get one action per turn. If you do more actions, you take penalties. That's not how our system runs at all. Like, people are starting to realize, oh my God, this is actually really playable. And it's the unified system helps out when there's a single point of yes or no, and to run with that. And it makes things a lot faster for everyone.
What
Yeah.
is the meta plot for adding metagens in?
So we give two choices, right? And we look at, so we call it splitting the veil, right? Or the veil. So there's a hidden garden, and there's a rending of the rending of the veil. It's the choice of how the DM wants, or the GM. So essentially, it's either the world just started to shift enough where old magic started to become real again, and the world hit that chaos meter, and things started becoming reality. They started manifesting on the physical earth once again, and all these myths and these fairy tales from around the world, people realized that they're not really fairy tales and myths, and there was this hidden side dimension, and now they've meshed together and become reality. The other version is more adapted for the super fantasy folks of rending the veil. There's the fantasy realm in this dimension. There's a massive war, the usual good versus bad. There's this chaos demon dragon god lord thing, and all the species were fighting against it. Something happens, they set off their magical nuke, it rends the veil, and they're transported onto our modern day earth around 2021 2022. And then we outline, like, hey, here's some things to think about when there are elves walking around suddenly. It's not going to be chipper and happy, right? Because no one's ever really chipper and happy in
oh
reality.
man, those dirty elven
Right?
immigrant caravans rolling in.
And so that is part of that discussion,
Yeah.
right? When we encourage, like, hey, there's games can be a really good mechanic or a mechanism for having conversations. Not you don't have to get political about it, but have that understanding of just look at the news and understand how people would respond to almost any of this. But
people are terrible, not good. That's my
yeah, I mean, it's true, right?
Nice.
Yeah, and that we spell that out.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, hey, look, people are going to people. That just is what it is.
Yeah.
And it's not limited to humanity. It's not like the elves and the dwarves are also not going to take sudden exception because they're considered, they're metagens, so they have abilities that humans don't have, and so they are, air quotes, I am better than you. So you're going to have these extremists on both ends. We cover that, but there is a general mesh. There was a concord that was reached, and so like the elves were given their own space, right? Because First Nations have their own territories now. The independent republics around the world have their own space. So the elves managed to carve out their own niche. Everyone has embassies, and you try to be harmonious, right? But that's that veneer level of, we all get along, right? But really the underbelly is we're all still doing things against each other. The elven glitches are probably going to go against, any of the dwarven corporations that are fronted, because it just is what it is. They need the information the dwarves have. And we try to get away from a lot of the stereotypes, but also put some, like, our elves definitely have different abilities than people are used to. Yeah, they see in the dark, but there's a reason they see in the dark. It's because where the elves are from in our system, they're from the Twilight realm, and it's essentially dusk at all times. And so they developed a natural predator's vision that allows them to enhance light to see. Instead of just being like, well, they see in the dark because elf, right? We wanted to have
they're kind of like cats, so they're evil.
Yeah, and we spell it out. They have that eyelid, right? Yeah. Like a cat does. And then our elves, one of the abilities our elves have, and it's a cool ability at the table, but it's an ability that requires a little bit of role playing, is the elves have the ability called Split the Veil, which is they can do a short teleport in a line of sight. But what they do is, and we've described it to people, and the players are like, look, this isn't just you stepping from one point to another point and getting a combat advantage. When you do this, role-playing wise, your elf can never go back home. They are trapped here on Earth forever. But the elves that are alive remember what it's like to be in their fancy gossamer court and running around with all of the butterflies and happy and, all the elven mechanisms. So when you split the veil, the elf actually steps into the veil for a brief second, and they get to witness heaven one more time, and then it snaps away from them. And so the disadvantage to doing this is
trauma. So they inflict trauma on themselves every time.
Absolutely. It's a psychological trauma and a mechanical trauma. So you may be able to teleport behind someone, but your next move is going to have a penalty to it because your elf is psychologically racked for the rest of the scene. Yeah. You're
going to be in the corner crying after the combat's over.
Yeah, right. Little things like that, So we try to church up all the species. Instead of you don't get the racial modifiers aren't part of what you gain to play an elf. But what we've done is we've reverse engineered that. So it's like, no, how bad do you want to be an elf? Because an elf has to have a +1 in one of 3 of these attributes. It's your choice, player. You don't get it for free, but you have to know that elves are a little bit better, and that +1 can exceed the human maximum of +3. So an elf can take their attributes to +4. And we wanted to bring that onto a player choice and say, look, it's your choice, but you don't get it. You're not automatically get it. It's just you're an elf, so you are better at some things. So what are you better at?
So did you get rid of the scoring? You're just using the modifier? Thank you.
Yeah, those scores are so pointless.
Yeah.
They are so pointless.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. Everyone wants to generate them, but
unnecessary complications is just like, why? Yes. I was so happy when Mutants and Masterminds, and it took them 3 editions to do it, but they eventually did get rid of, the number, right?
Well, it's such a trope, right? And when our first game did the same thing, and people at the table were just, well, how could you? Like, well, what are you going to do with a 13 strength? Well, I don't know what a +2 strength means. I was like, well, if a human normal is +0 and a human maximum potential is +3, I need you to imaginate and work with me on what you think a +2 looks like.
Yeah.
Well, am I super buff? I don't know. You tell me.
Ooh, how does it how does using these archaic numbers make it any more clear?
Well, I know a 10 is normal. Okay, well, a 0 is normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
How do I
paradigms.
know what it means if I don't do extra math for no reason?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, all true, man, all true. But yeah, that was a very early decision to get rid of attribute scores in both games. I can't do them.
I think it's a good one. So Mike wants to know, was the Above and Beyond inspired by the show of the same name?
I do know what he's talking about. Partially, yes, because of Cyberpunk. If you think of our Above and Beyond, and you take the Above and Beyond, right, and you look at how that played out, and a little bit of the expanse with that conclusion of where we would be as a species, and still the interpersonal conflicts, and still those conflicts of people who are born out there. Yes, it's a fine meshing of corporations exist. Everybody wants money, and they're going to find ways of making that money, and leaving the earth is not going to be any different for us. So I hope you're ready to be a wage slave sitting in some moon base somewhere.
Yeah, I can't believe we exist that long, because I just can't I conceive that many adding that many zeros to what a corporation makes and doesn't pay taxes on. So.
Oh, it's ridiculous. And so yeah, that's where we turned in our thing, is like once the civilization started to collapse, in 2021, and through a few years through that, the corporations realized quickly, like, oh man, hey, we need to consolidate power, because they're being allowed to form new governments. We're going to make a government. And so we have these 13 mega corporations that are in charge of the 13, the broadest aspects of society. So like Zeph Industries controls fashion, and they have all these subsidiary companies that you may not even know that, like Blue Bottle Jeans actually is owned by Zeph, but you have to understand that's how it all works, right? That they own all the things. And so in the book, I actually quote, I change it. I quote The Devil Wears Prada, when she's talking to the girl about, I bet you think you're just wearing some simple blue throw on, sweater. But what you don't really know is that is periwinkle blue, and 2 years ago it was highlighted at a fashion show put on by this corporation. And she kind of walks the line of like, and this is why you're wearing some Walmart knockoff in this very specific blue color that you find irresistible. And no, it wasn't just some random instance. Everything is controlled for you.
Sounds scarily accurate.
uh, that is what I let my wife read the section on geopolitics, and she
Yeah.
got done and she was just like, wow, you might be a prophet.
Yeah. You're writing a how-to manual for corporations.
I hope not.
So Brian, cyberpunk corporations and those villainous networks always seem overwhelming to try to run. How does the system help run bad guy networks schemes?
Okay, so our hacking is fairly straightforward, and what we go with is the top-down approach. Is there's a neural net, right? So that's the broad global internet. Now, every company from 7-Eleven to Burger King to Toyota has a localized mesh that it separates and then segregates their internals from the neural net, but there are pathways through that neural net, so you can hop around from mesh to mesh with the right hacker doing all the things. And then we come down to a even closer view. Everyone has a personal area network, so everything about you is connected through your cell phone, your cyber eyes, your smart gun link, your actual smart gun itself, your cyber limbs. Everyone has these personal areas, and that's important for how our hacking actually operates. So when you do a run, again, we have this unified system of D4 through D12, and we use the dice a lot in the game. So a D4 represents the lowest level of threat to somebody. A D12 is the highest level of threat to somebody, and that's how these meshes are designed. So like a 7-Eleven mesh that you're going to on the corner, they may not actually give too much care about what's going on, because 7-Eleven is what it is. And so that mesh in that 7-Eleven might be a D4, and that represents the threat to the hacker if they mess up and are taking damage while making the run. And then they have a defense, so that will come in when you're trying to combat the A2I if you have to go against the A2I is our term for advanced AI in the game that controls the meshes and pans and runs all the gear that you could possibly have. So when you're doing a run against the mesh and you're hacking, if your goal is to go through a mesh and say your team is 5 miles away at a facility, and the hacker doesn't have to be on site, but there are benefits to being on site. It's a quick chart system and you throw down some D12s and a couple of D20s. And the D20s represent your access point, your egress point to get the data you want. And the D12s in between, they represent the various nodes that you're going to get to. And then when you start your hack, as you jump through these, the nodes are either lure nodes or they are A2I combat nodes. They're data cache nodes. They're bit miner nodes where they have the digital currency or cryptocurrency that you could steal. And we've provided a lot of things to do for the hacker. Everything moves very, very quickly, again, because of how the initiative works. So our initiative system, you're not just taking one action per round. And the hackers have apps that help facilitate some of this. Hackers can offload some of what they do with the use of a botnet. And so that's kind of how they go through it. And it moves really quickly, and it's all very straightforward dice rolls. And that's the general hack. Now, if your team is engaged in a firefight and you realize that you're either there with them or you're kind of overwatching with them because you're all in comms and you understand what's happening. Our primary hacking we refer to as VX in honor of the old virus databases. So there's also what we call the P2P hacking. And so you can actually come at someone's personal area network to begin to seize control of them, shut down their eyes, shut off their smart guns, turn off IFF so they can shoot their buddies with burst fire options, shut down cyber legs, right? We wanted to make hacking very visceral to where you're going to get to it and really get into it. We have protective hacking, which is our counter hacking. So you can bolster one of your teammates. If an enemy hacker is coming at them, you might need to be able to bolster them up. Or you can do a back run to try to find that hacker and then really take it to them. The good news is everyone technically can hack in the game. Every skill is usable by every character. In fact, we had, I think as our medic last night, started a low-level hack against a very low-threat pan. And he was trying to push through and take control of the security camera to turn it down while the hacker was busy shutting down Gang Boss. Who was using a smart shotgun on the players, and he wanted to shut off that smart link. So that's how, I don't know if that answers the question, but it gives you an overview of how hacking works. We put everything player choice into hacking, again, just like firefights and ammo expenditure. So when you're hacking, you may find a node, and you don't need to go through all those nodes. You're going to roll a handful of 12-siders, but your real goal is, so you got to move through three successes before 3 failures to get to your endpoint to get the data that you need. But what we've done is like, hey, you know that node that you're not going to go through? That's a data cache node, and it could have money. It could have information that you can sell on the black market. You might have an app library that you can download some free apps. And so it's that choice of like you do with most thieves in a game, right? Like, oh man, I really don't need to open that chest in that secret room I found, but man, they're fine. They can take a few more rounds of combat and get the shot at, no big deal. So that's how we've done it and made that a player interaction. We wanted to give hackers that choice of like, just because you're hacking in a computer doesn't mean you're safe, and it doesn't mean that your team doesn't need you also to be able to flip between what you're doing on the fly as a real hacker would in combat for cyber defense and cyber attack.
So basically, virtual dungeons is the gist.
Yeah,
it's kind of cool.
Yeah, kind of, right? Yeah, but you can do it, and no hack will be the same because we give people these 4 tables that are essentially, you know, the results of your 12-sided rolls. But if you mix and match those tables, your numbers are endless. So no hack will ever be the same. And no node relay will be the same. And you can actually do it ahead of time if you want to save energy, or you can let the player do it, which my players have always preferred when they're like, the hacker's like, all right, what am I going to do? Like, roll them D12s. Let's find out what you have. And they put everything up, and they get to, and with the D20s, those numbers represent the target number for their hack skill to get into and out of a system. And so you see their faces like, oh man, I rolled a 14 and a 16. You're like, well, which one's first? You know, how are you getting in and how are you getting out? You know, because if you have too many failures, the system starts fighting back against you. And so sometimes you're like, man, I really don't want that high ass number up in the back, but I also don't want a high number up front. So I don't know what to do. Again, we allow everyone to set up their little node dungeon, right? Like you said, of how they want to proceed and challenge themselves. And they have all, you know, your skills and what you're about and all your apps. And then we have there's a young lady in Arkansas just across the river from us, and she sent me prototype dice that I bought from her, and we're going to offer them. I want to offer them at some point. I was going to be an add-on. I just didn't get a chance to get to it, but they actually capture the hacking icons from the tables. And so you could actually roll these 12-siders and they will tell you right away what the story is on the board. And you visualize, oh, there's an A2I node, there's a lure node, there's a data cache node, there's a library node. And yeah, it seems fun, but we're still testing those. But eventually, I do want to make those available to the public.
That does sound cool. That's definitely going to get a mixed reaction.
Yeah, we'll definitely get a mixed reaction because it's like I'm not supposed to know what the nodes are. I'm like, yeah.
Oh no, I wasn't even thinking that. Just the idea of custom
Oh,
dice. I've seen
oh yeah, you
proprietary
don't.
custom dice.
Oh my God, yeah, and you don't have to have them. Like I said,
Yeah,
that's why we haven't offered them up. And the system is definitely written for D12s. We give a lot of love to the D12 in this system. Um,
it,
yeah, I don't know why. It just felt natural.
I've seen that oftentimes where people are just like, this dice gets no love. So that was a great
Yeah.
answer. I don't
Oh,
think it was
thank you.
necessarily an answer to the question,
Oh,
but it was a
sorry.
good answer. Basically, what they wanted to know was like advice for running Megacorps as the villains in that world, and do you kind of how do you address that in the book?
Okay, so yeah, man, I'm so sorry. I completely
That's
missed
okay.
the
I thought it
point.
was a great answer for hacking.
Man, so hopefully hacking sounds awesome for those people interested in it. So with the mega corporations, they're going to hire hackers too, right? So your facility is going to have a hacker on site, and it's not like your hacker is sitting there. So you need to do that, right? So that hacker may not be interested in stopping you as a hacker. They may be more interested in shutting down your team. And so everything you're doing and what we talked about, right, is what the corporation is going to do to you. If you're in there hacking, well, there's a chance that their hacker is going to notice you and he's going to do a back run on you. And so now you're going to start having this little, opposed conflict of you trying to escape. Sorry, one second. And so that's how the corporations go at this. So but the insidious part is they want you to be a hacker, right? Because it's tantalizing. How good's our system? Come on in and we'll put some low threat nodes here for you and put these breadcrumbs down for you, because they want to test their security. That everyone needs to do pen tests when it comes to cybersecurity. And this is part of that evolution of how they do it. And maybe they need something out of you. If they can detect you and know who you are, that could benefit you in the storyline later. But yeah, the mega corporations, it's not like you're going to just walk into, we'll use a common term that people might know. You're not going to walk into Arasaka, and just be like, oh, I'm just here to start hacking in your lobby. That's a suicide mission, because, their threat level is going to be a D12 plus more. So yeah, I think it's the subtle use of as a villain, right, of the bigger plot thread, and how that villain would send out its minions to deal with the glitches that are on hand. And once you start making a name for yourself, expect like Akira Solutions is one of our big weapons manufacturers that everyone wants their data because their guns and gear just seems to work really, really well. And they have EMP shielding, things like that are built into the devices. And so someone's going to send you against Akira Solutions, and eventually you're going to make an enemy out of Akira Solutions, and they're going to start wanting to have glitches come after you, right, to run on you. They're going to have hackers come after you. They're going to send drones after you. So hopefully that better answers the question of how to use the corporation as a villain.
And that kind of dovetails nicely into that. DBJ wants to know unique adversaries for GMs, like a monster manual, like robots, aliens, nanotech swarms.
Yeah, we do. We have a section called Op4, and it walks you through some of the basics that you're going to find, like gangers, cybersecurity or security forces, mundanes, right? You got your normies in there and what they can do, like your augmentation docs. But yeah, we do have a full list out, and we kept everything very simple for the GM. So, can a citizen with a handgun kill a Krieg? Maybe. Right, depending on how that citizen handles that gun. And we've also added things like, hey, here's a little flare chart for this kid, might be a net nerd, but he just happens to go visit gun ranges every day or every week, so he actually has a bonus to his firearms use, and he might get a little panicky, and then he opens fire, and lo and behold, now you've got someone who actually can pose a potential threat to the group that you thought was just some skateboarding punk, right? But yeah, there's a full thing. And then Preternatural Chrome also has a bestiary in it that makes sense for what we wanted to capture. It's not like you're going to have like, I don't know, like serpent people running around and whatnot. We really got it down to, here's some, there might be a Minotaur, there's some undead, there's things like that make the most sense for capturing the feel of magic and psionics inside of 2035 in a real Earth setting.
Yeah, it really makes me think, what happens with like a giant or a troll that's been decked out with, with all these augmentations, and also like they just have more space, right?
Yeah, very true, right? And that's one of the pieces of art is actually our cyber augmented Minotaur. So Yeah, and they're going to have pans because the monsters are the sentient ones are smart. They know how to do all the things. They can. It's not like the Minotaur is going to come at you with an axe. They might have a Nova axe, which is a superheated, monofilament edged axe, but it's also going to have an LMG, because it's a creature and they can think.
Yeah. It's like this is not effective anymore.
Yeah.
So I also see you have a soundtrack.
I do have a soundtrack.
And who did the soundtrack for you guys?
Oh man, I want to get this completely right. So I need to get the kid's name. I say kid because I'm 48. Sorry, people. Sorry.
No, I totally get it. Everyone's a kid after a certain point.
Yeah. It's just like, oh man, where is his name? Oh man. Now I feel terrible. I should have gotten this down. One Symphony Man is what he goes by. Very clever, very cool throwback. There's a ton of tracks. What I want to do is we're going to organize it to like, hey, here's like a good flow for a theme from front to back of an adventure in your head. If you're going to help, if you want to write a scene or whatnot, and then the rest is just, super cool music that you can use to set other moods at the table.
Yeah. How did you find your musician?
Dude, it was a stroke of luck. Just browsing around looking for like art and cartographers, which is really difficult to find, and I don't know why. But I happened to see this thing where this guy does music, and he had a link to it, and I'm like, oh my god, let me check this out. And then I started listening to it, and I was like, oh, let me DM you, and I want to ask you some questions about licensing and commercial use. And yeah, it was really easy. He was just more excited to be able to provide. It's like all artists, right? He was super happy to be like, hey, this, very cool. Please use this in commercial product, and just, give him full credit. And I was like, you're the only musician we have. And I thought including a soundtrack would be kind of a cool throwback to, that 1980s setting. But we're definitely not 1980s. There's no Johnny Mnemonic internet in Neon Blood. It's actual real internet.
Yeah. So are they a gamer?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I mean, not that it's a requirement, but it's also kind of cool.
It helps. Yeah, it helps. That's our cartographer. I finally found a cartographer late in the game, and she is outstanding. She's linked on our Kickstarter page. Her renders are just amazing. But I told her, I was like, hey, I can't find someone to make maps because they don't understand what non-exclusive license means. Yeah. So, and she was like, no, I get it. Yeah, you want to use the map, and I don't mind, and I get to still sell the map. I was like, there we go. Thank you. Someone who understands the term non-exclusive licensing.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah. So, when is expected delivery?
So the latest possible is September, but we are pretty much done with everything. I think the sprawl kit is the last thing I really need to flesh out. The PDF is put together. I need to go to a copy editor. She's waiting to hit that and go through it and make me add more words, which is fine, or stop using, stop confusing that and which in English when you write, which is very common apparently. It's very difficult habit to get out of.
Our content director will say most of the time people use that. It's totally unnecessary.
Absolutely, right? You got to learn to cut it out and stop using it. And it's basically a filler word like And
I'm like, that sounds like your problem.
Yeah, no, perfect. Yeah, so I still think I can get the PDF in everyone's hands by May, is what I'm guessing. Yeah, we fulfilled early too for our fantasy system as well. So yeah, I'm guessing May for the PDFs, and then the layout. Our layout guru is currently busy with a small company called Pinnacle Entertainment on their Rune Lord project for Pathfinder, the collaboration. But I have asked him and begged him. He did my other products, and he's like, yeah, I can, if you push it back a little bit for print on demand delivery, I can work with you. And so he's an awesome, his work is amazing. So layout should be,
And what was the first project you did?
So because I am the kind of person I am, it is called Oubliettes, Sorcery, and Reavers, OSR. Yeah, we really took things and turned it on their head a little bit for the OSR crowd, but it's a lot of player-facing choice. It's just like this. We wanted you to think about what you're doing. And like for Neon Blood, there is no, the games I design, there's no dump stat. I do not like min-maxing. I do not like I must optimize my character at the table or I can't play the game correctly. Mm-hmm. So that's not possible in the system. And I've had people challenge that. And I tell them, good luck, because if you think charisma is a dump stat because you're a berserker in our system, a Krieg, it's not a dump stat. Charisma is in high use in this system. Intelligence is in high use, regardless of what character class or role you take on. So there is no dump stat. It comes down to those player choices of where your comfort level is and doing without. And you're not going to optimize. Just not going to happen.
So how does advancement happen? Because you mentioned, when you level up, it's not like you get more hit points.
Right. So through the adventures, we have there's the section on we call it upgrade. Mm-hmm. And there's a list of, I don't know, probably maybe 15 or 20 ideas for a GM and players. But like, when do I get experience? Okay, well, our experience is very, very, very small. So if you flatline, you get 1 experience point, because nothing is a better teacher than you getting killed and being brought back, right, by medical technologies. And you're like, oh, I will learn from that experience. And so we abstract out what your learning points are. It's not just killing things. It's meeting friends, making enemies, meeting new allies, all the things that you would expect that would take place in a normal, overcoming a social conflict. A successful chase might give you some experience points. So when you hit 13 experience points, then you can look at the upgrades. And we have combat upgrades and non-combat upgrades, ability upgrades, talents, and you get to choose one from a list. And so every, say, 4 to 5, maybe 6 sessions, you're upgrading, but that upgrade is totally up to you. If you're playing a hacker and you suddenly want to shoot guns better, that's possible for you. You can upgrade your shoot skill and get training in that and make yourself better at it. If you want more hit points, you're going to have to waste your upgrade on more hit points, right? I said waste just because there's armor and cover, and it's also keeping everything bound encourages players to start really thinking outside the box of, other than, this is a video game, we're playing Final Fantasy and I hop forward and I attack with my sword or my gun, and then I hop back and then they do the same thing. And it's like, no, this is a living environment. And when we teach GMs how to create scenes of Neon Blood, we incorporate all of that. So that's part of that upgrade, is definitely want to think about what you're doing. Do you want to upgrade your armor capabilities? Do you want to buy more of that? You can upgrade how well armor works for you. Sky's the limit. Pretty much anything you can do in the game can be upgraded to the next natural tier to work for you.
So like, I think you mentioned bounded accuracy before, and just said bound a couple times.
Yeah.
So what is your impossible number?
You mean where things might start breaking?
So I guess like Wizards of the Coast 5e comes out with 5e. They introduced bounded accuracy, the concept with their game, and they're like 30 is the impossible number. And then after you've been playing for a few years, you realize not so much.
Yeah, no, it's not. That's it. I don't think we have an impossible number, but because of the way it can fluctuate and the decisions that you make, I mean, seeing results over 20 gets to be pretty rare.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But it's still given enough time at the table and enough upgrades and enough gear and dumping cyberware, and you're going to see the natural progression anyway. And by that time, you're probably done playing with those characters. Maybe not.
Yeah, I think we like to do like ridiculous builds and stuff, like theory crafting, and like 30 is the impossible number. But I think we've done some builds for like really specific things where we've reached the 70s. So
wow, man. Yeah. I mean, given the right math, I'm not a mathlete by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah, we've kept everything deliberately low just because of that. Because at some point it's like, what are we doing?
Yeah. We're back in 3rd edition with a DC 80 check to swim up a waterfall.
Yeah, right. It's like, what are we doing? Are we really having fun, or are we just having fun?
And part of why we do it, we kind of like, it's a little mocking when we do it, I guess.
Sure, of course, right? I mean, yeah, we started off with, why play your game? Well, my game is playable.
Yeah.
That's how I started writing my first game, is like, well, I can make a better Dungeons and Dragons that actually magic matters in. And it's where I started the system. Is I started the fantasy game based around the idea that magic should feel special and should actually feel like magic. And then it just sprung out. And with Neon Blood, I started from, firefights in most games is really boring and stupid. So how can I change the initiative? and I have we twisted our initiative around, and the feedback has been nothing but positive. It sounds weird the first time you see it or hear it, but then within the second time, you're like, oh my God, this is outstanding. And now I understand the genius behind why you would do this with initiative. So, and again, it's that arrogance and hubris of like, I can make a game better than you.
Yeah. How much tinkering did it take you to get to the point where you are now?
Oh man. Yeah, that's crazy. Cause last night I found the alpha documents, and it was like 3 pages of notes of like, here Scott's arrogance. Here are the things wrong with role-playing games. So it's been about about a year with this, just really sitting down and playing with it, running through some scenarios, getting some feedback, understanding like, oh, okay, this is if X happens and Y will need to happen, but if W is also happening, you need to make sure those all coincide and make sense in the flow of the narrative and the flow of the mechanics. And so that takes the most time.
So I prefer that kind of an answer to like things that I've heard when people are designing stuff, and I'm like, well, why did you do this way, or why are you making this? And there's not really a reason. There's not like it's like, or the reason is like, well, I want it to be different. Like I'm like, it's the reason why like when we get asked like, are you going to make your own game? I'm like, I don't know. There's a lot of really good ones. I could just pick one of those that solves one of the problems I have with something. Yeah. Like for me to do it, it's like I got to come up with a better solution.
Yeah.
And I like to hear when people tell me about like, oh, well, here's the problems that I saw, and these are what I want to fix, and that's why I'm doing the thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Even if I don't agree with them, at least I can respect them, and it's like, oh, like here's a process that right, makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So instead of just because I want it to be different,
right? I don't know. I thought maybe Cyberpunk was hot, so I do something with it. No, I'm like, no, man.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So we are actually just past the hour mark now. Final thoughts before we head out?
No, come check us out. Eventually we'll have a YouTube channel that will come up and start kind of walking through the rules and explain the finer details. But yeah, if you're interested in Cyberpunk, at least check out the Kickstarter. Don't back it, please. Something, whatever you choose to do. But yeah, if you like Cyberpunk and you want gunfights and hacking to come together and not leave the table bored as tears when one is happening, the other's not, I think Neon Blood is your solution.
Nice. Oh, one quick question for it. Will there be gun? Is there gun fu?
Yes. Yeah. Our melee mechanic turns things on its head quite significantly. And yeah, if you're using our melee is essentially modeled after how you bring John Wick to a table in the middle of a cyberpunk firefight.
Nice. That's awesome. Thanks for coming on. Enjoyed chatting with you. Until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.